right. Hey, everybody. It is Monday. It is the 13th of October, 2025. I hope you have had a good day. Have you had enough of the coverage concerning the release of the Israeli hostages in Israel, Palestine? To be clear, I personally am glad that people who were taken hostage have been released, at least the remaining survivors. At the same time that these 20 living hostages were released by Hamas, 1,700 hostages had been held by the Israeli government were also released. And it should raise the question, I think, with everybody, why were there 1,700 hostages, 1,700 people sitting in Israeli prisons that were released? There are many more, of course. There's upwards of another 1,000 people who have been arrested in Israel, Palestinians, for crimes ranging from murder all the way down to using a road that Palestinian Arabs are not allowed to use. Roads that are reserved strictly for the Jewish Israeli citizens. So, yes, hostages have been released. And now what? You know, I watched a little bit of the toilet rat when he was in Israel this morning addressing the Israeli parliament about the glorious work that he has done. And I could stand it for about 2 or 3 minutes, had to turn it off. Seriously. There's nothing as sickening to me as some half-wit like Donald Trump, who all of a sudden decides he's going to take credit for the end of hostilities that have been simmering for the past 80 years. Trump doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about ever. I don't know who writes his script, but it certainly was heavy on Jesus Christ and Christianity, and how blessed everybody was that Jesus and Donald Trump were able to bring this to an end. Just disgusting, just goddamn disgusting to listen to this ignorant savage talk addressing the Israeli parliament. Just unbelievable. But since there has been so much focus on the return of the hostages and very little focus from the so-called other side of this horrible equation, I thought I would address some of that from the Palestinian side. First of all, I would assume that you are not naive enough to believe that all of a sudden this era of peace and love and joy is going to flourish in Israel-Palestine now, and by extension, the Middle East. I would suggest it is not. This is just one more temporary step that leads to nowhere. The Jews and the Muslims and the Christians living in Israel-Palestine will never reach accommodation. They cannot, because of the strictures of their religious beliefs. They cannot. And I say that as someone who has been observing the horror in the Middle East since the 1967 war. And I hate the accusation that I'm a pessimist. But where it concerns Israel-Palestine, yes, I guess that would be the right label to put on me, a pessimist. I've seen so much. Look what Jimmy Carter tried to do. Look what Bill Clinton tried to do. Getting the leaders of the PLO and the Israeli government together to shake hands. And shortly after that, the Israeli prime minister was assassinated by one of his own people because he had the temerity to think about peace in Israel-Palestine. And he was murdered. Look at the leader of Egypt. Same thing, because because he had an idea of peace in the Middle East. He was assassinated by his own people. I do not believe anything that comes out of the mouth of Netanyahu or Donald Trump. Not a fucking word. And when they are both on the same page, the rest of the world better pay attention, because this is trouble with all caps. So the speed with which this, allegedly Trump came up with a 20-point peace plan. Trump came up with it? Give me a fucking break. He is in this country systematically destroying democracy. Gutting, ruining, burning to the ground the idea of equal protection under the law, equal justice under the law. Trump is a fucking Nazi, and so is Netanyahu. So to celebrate this agreement is beyond me. I can't. I'll say again, I'm glad to hear that 20 living Israelis were released and that 1,700 living Palestinians were released. I think the idea of holding hostages is so fucking primitive, so insane. But as far as celebrating beyond that, I can't do it. So the way this is being reported is that Israeli authorities this morning released hundreds of these Palestinian detainees and prisoners. And again, it's referred to as a Trump administration brokered ceasefire plan, which is just absolute horseshit. I don't know who wrote it, but you can bet your ass it was not Donald Trump. He's too fucking stupid. Oh, my God. So these 1,700 Palestinians released, they represent mostly Gaza residents, some from the West Bank, who have been arrested by the Israeli military over the last 2 years, but they weren't charged with any crimes. They were just snatched, which is what the Gestapo in this country, the Stasi in this country, Trump's ICE capades, that's what they're doing. Same thing. But anyway, the release of the Palestinians resulted in, as to be expected, joy, relief in the West Bank and Gaza, both places Israeli occupied. And they were released a few hours, according to what I've read, a few hours after Hamas released the remaining live hostages, the Israeli hostages. In Ramallah, in the West Bank, prisoners from that part of Israel-Palestine who had been transferred from Israeli jails were met with, to be expected, thousands of well-wishers in the West Bank. And then again in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, the same thing. A few hours later, several dozen buses, it's been reported, carrying the detainees, moved through the crowd. Thousands of people screamed and cheered and praised Allah. So these 1,700 roughly detainees from Gaza who returned there today are among thousands of people from Gaza that the Israeli military seized during the war. And not all that different from what happened to the 250 Israeli hostages. The families and the friends and the moms and dads and the families of the Palestinian detainees were left for months with no notion of where their family members were, any idea if they were still alive. And I think the reason for that is up until the horror that Netanyahu perpetrated against Gaza and the slaughter of 60, 70, 80,000 innocent people who did not a fucking thing except be a Palestinian. And along with within that horrendous slaughter number are 10, 15, 20, 25,000 kids under the age of 10. So the celebrations going on in Tel Aviv or Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, which is where the toilet rat then went after his display of bullshit in Jerusalem. I don't know. It's just difficult to find the words for me. It really is. When Hamas attacked southern Israel and slaughtered 1,700 people, I couldn't believe what I saw, the videos that I saw, and they were explicit at the very beginning. If you remember this, not all of them, none of them made it onto the 6 o'clock news, so to speak, but on YouTube and various other sites, the videos of this invasion, you might call it, was clear and awful. And I remember thinking at the time, 2 years ago, this is only going to be just a massive response from Netanyahu. And then as this developed over the next few days, few weeks, few months, whatever, it started to leak out that there was a very good chance, more than a good chance, a very good probability that Netanyahu knew that Hamas was massing its forces on the southern area of Israel where this invasion by Hamas took place, and did nothing. Netanyahu, waiting for, anticipating, and hoping for what actually happened on October 7th, 2 years ago. And then when it did happen, it gave Netanyahu what he has always wanted, a clear, unequivocal reason in the minds of the Israeli government to begin slaughtering Palestinians, literally slaughtering them, leveling Gaza. Have you seen the pictures? Have you seen the drone footage of what Gaza looks like now? And I made this comparison before. To me, it looks like Hiroshima after we dropped a nuclear bomb on that Japanese city. But there is Gaza, just rubble, nothing. And some of the videos that I've seen in the last 12 hours showed Palestinians joyfully returning to where they used to live, which was now just mounds of chunks of concrete and rebar and dust and corpses and dead, everything. There's something so out of balance here. It is just so out of balance. Going back to the attack on October 6th or October 7th, 2 years ago, the attack by Hamas, which we all have come to accept as being a terrorist organization. Would we consider actions taken by the IDF against Palestinians to be acts of terror? Well, I guess not, because the IDF is an officially recognized arm of the Israeli government, right? And everybody knows that military arms of governments do not commit, well, or do they? We, in the United States, have had enough experience with knowing that some of our troops during Vietnam, for example, or during Iraq, committed what can only be described as war crimes. One of the reasons we're not members or signatories to the International Criminal Court. But I digress. The attack by Hamas could have been explained and has been explained by writers observers, people who understand the history, what happened to the Palestinian people going back to 1948 and prior to 1948, when the British were involved in killing Palestinians, until the British finally said, fuck it, and left and turned it over to the immigrants coming in from America and Europe and Russia and South Africa, the Jews who were descending on Palestine. And the Brits just walked away from it. But since that time, how many Americans understand what happened to the Palestinians? Entire villages were erased by the Jews who had decided to do what their Bible, what their religious writings told them to do, what their God said, I give you this land, now go take it. Just like when Joshua crossed the River Jordan, what was one of the first things he did? He attacked Jericho. He attacked the Canaanites and slaughtered, according to God, every fucking living thing. You know your Sunday school history. Of course, it's kind of smoothed over in, at least in the Christian religion, with hymns, with songs. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho and the walls came tumbling down. Oh, well, glory. In the West Bank, where very little attention has been paid because of what the horror that's been going on in Gaza, hundreds of families right now, have been told to get the fuck out of their homes. Their olive groves and their farms have been burned and bombed and destroyed by settlers with the help of the Israeli Defense Forces. Would you call those settlers a terrorist organization? I would. You're goddamn right I would. You know, armed so-called settlers? What is this? The reason they're called settlers is because the West Bank, that area from the River Jordan extending west, was supposed to be a place for Palestinians after the 1967 war to live, to be. So what do you call people, gangs who arm themselves and have the backing somewhere over the last hill where you can't really see them of the army, but gangs of Israeli so-called settlers, invaders, who have gone into the West Bank and forced people out, burned their homes, destroyed their farms, killed them? What the fuck do you call that? I call it terrorism. Oh, my goodness. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.